The final update to Iceborne is here, and with it comes one of the toughest challenges in the game. Fatalis the Black Dragon will test even the best of hunters, so I'm Darcblade with an Anti-Fatalis build for the Lance in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now the main purpose of an anti-build, sometimes referred to as a counter build, is to create a build that is made to take on a specific monster in the game. And whilst in all honesty Fatalis can be pretty much taken on with any set as long as it's got high DPS, the builds in this series are aimed to make the hunt more manageable. When it comes to the Lance, it's an effective weapon at taking on Fatalis. With the right skills, it's able to block pretty much all of Fatalis' attacks and then follow it up with attacks of your own. So long as you don't get greedy and attack when you should be blocking, as well as manage your stamina correctly, you'll have a very strong defense to take on Fatalis with the Lance, whilst also having a decent damage output against the monster. So for the Anti-Fatalis Lance build, you'll need the Saphi Crested Crown beta, the Escadora Soul beta, Saphi Crested Vambraces beta, Saphi Crested Belt beta, and the Escadora Sheaves beta. I'm also using a Wormsbane Charm 5, and for my weapon I'm using Elatrion Gleam. This has a health regen augmentation and then an elemental up augmentation. As for the specialist tools, I've gone for a Temporal Mantle and Rocksteady Mantle for defensive purposes. So when it comes to the jewels, you've got a fair few to play around with. So I've gone for Tenderizer jewels for the weakness exploit skill, Fervor jewels for the resentment skill, a Dragon jewel to max out dragon attack, Defense jewel for defense boost, Protection jewels for divine blessing, a Fortitude jewel for the fortify skill, Destroyer jewels for part breaker, a Shield jewel for the guard up skill, and Iron Wall jewels for the guard skill. As for the jewels on the mantles, I've simply gone for Heavy Artillery jewels for the heavy artillery skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You'll have a raw attack of 679 with a decent chunk of purple sharpness. You have 20% affinity, which can be 70% when you're taking into account weakness exploits as well. You have a dragon rating of 1070. Please take note that the dragon rating and base affinity shown here are with the Dragon Vein Awakening buff in effect. You have low Elder Seal, and when it comes to your defense, you have a strong defense of 1116 that is strong against every element, especially fire and ice. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you'll have Dragon Attack at level 6. Dragon Attack increases the dragon rating and damage of a build, and as Fatalis' weakest to this element, dragon weapons or high raw attack weapons are normally the best choices to go with. You have Resentment level 5. Resentment is a useful skill, especially for the Lance, and especially as we're using parts of the Saphi Jiva armor. Whenever we have a red portion of health on our health bar, it will grant us increased raw attack. You have Guard level 5. Guard is a skill that increases how effectively we can block monster attacks. The higher the guard level, the less we'll be knocked back when we take a hit from a monster, and you'll also have the stamina cost for blocking that said attack reduced. Having guard at level 5 allows us to still perform Lance counter attacks, which is essential for our DPS. Anyway, you have Defense Boost level 4. Defense Boost is a skill that I wouldn't normally go for. Basically it increases the defense rating of a build, and at level 4 or above it will grant us bonus elemental resistances as well. However, I've gone for it because it's built into part of the armor we're using, and because we're using the element conversion found on the Escadora armor pieces. Having an increase to our elemental defenses will also increase our dragon and elemental ratings as well. You have Health Boost at level 3, allowing our health to get to that maximum of 200. You have Weakness Exploit level 3, which is a decent skill that increases our affinity whenever we're attacking monster weak points. And should these weak points be tenderized through Clutch Claw attacks first, this increase to our affinity is even greater. Weakness Exploit at level 3 can potentially provide us an extra 50% bonus affinity. You have Part Breaker level 3, which is a useful skill that makes it easier to break monster body parts, and this is kind of essential in a way when it comes to the Fatalis hunt. During the hunt you'll want to break the monster's head and horns in order to power down the monster. If not, when you reach phase 3, if you haven't broken the horns, then it will gain blue flames which can pretty much one-shot any hunter. Part Breaker just allows us to break the horns more quickly and thus survive the later phases. Anyway, you have Evade Window level 3, which is a byproduct of the armor we're wearing, but is still useful. It basically increases the invincibility frames when we perform evades and dodges. This also does apply to the little hops that you can also perform with the Lance. You have Divine Blessing level 3, which is a useful defensive skill that gives us a chance at taking reduced damage when we take a hit from a monster. However, this isn't a guaranteed reduction in damage, so it's risky at times. Anyway, you have Blight Resistance level 1, a byproduct of the armor, but helps reduce the time that elemental blights remain active on our hunter. You have Crit Boost level 1, which is a skill that increases the damage of our attacks whenever we crit a monster. It would have been nice to get this higher, but crit boost at level 1 is still useful. It gives us a bonus 30% extra damage when we crit a monster. However, this bonus damage is only applied to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. You have Fortify level 1, which again is a useful skill when you're taking on tough hunts in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, as whenever you faint you'll come back with increased raw attack and defense. This buff can be applied 2 times to a hunter. Next up you have Guard level 1, which allows us to block unblockable attacks, kind of essential when taking on Fatalis, as a lot of its moves, especially the eruption moves, the fire moves that explode from the ground, and some of the breath attacks, can't be blocked unless you have Guard up. And whilst yes, the Lance has the Guard up function built into its moveset now thanks to charging up the Power Guard, it's still nice to have the Guard up skill so you can quickly block these unblockable attacks without having to assume the Power Guard stance. And then finally, when you're wearing your mantles, you'll have Heavy Artillery level 2. This is a skill that increases the damage of the heavy artillery found around Shrade Castle by 100%. So whenever you're going to fire a ballista or cannon or whatever, try to make sure you have a mantle ready to go before you actually fire them. So for the set bonuses, you have 2 of them. First is the Safi'jiiva Seal, Dragon Vein Awakening. This is a buff that kicks in whenever you have your weapon drawn. With your weapon drawn, it will grant us bonus affinity as well as increased elemental damage. However, with each swing of our weapon or poke with the lance, it will drain our health, leaving a portion of red health on our health bar, which in turn will activate the resentment skill. But this obviously is risky, as if you drain your health too much and take a hit, you could potentially cart. However, with the health regen augmentation, this kind of counters this. On top of that, if you consecutively hit a monster for a set amount of time, then the Dragon Vein Awakening will actually initiate a heal, healing you for the health it drained. And then finally you have the Elatrion Divinity Element Conversion, which increases our elemental rating as we increase our elemental resistances. Thus the reason we've gone for defense boost at level 4, so we get some bonus to our elemental damage there. So there we have it, that is the build I'd recommend for taking on Fatalis with the Lance. In a way it's a decent all-round build, although it leans more to defense than offense in all honesty. But that being said, so long as you're on point with your counter attacks and attacking Fatalis' weak points, then this build is easily able to take down the monster. However, every build out there has pros and cons. When it comes to the pros on this build, its biggest pros is its guarding capabilities, able to pretty much block all of Fatalis' attacks bar its ultimate. On top of that, this build is also decent when it comes to both elemental and raw attack damage. Having resentment combined with dragon attack means that we should be able to do a decent amount of damage to Fatalis and finish the hunt. And then finally, when it comes to the pros, this build does have quite a few quality of life skills, from defense boost, health boost, part breaker, evade window, divine blessing and more. These will all add to the quality of a hunt and make it feel a little bit more manageable. But unfortunately there are cons to every build. The biggest cons for this build is unfortunately the Dragon Vein Awakening health drain. Whilst not as bad as the true Dragon Vein Awakening health drain, it's still noteworthy and a con against the build. And the other con is, unfortunately, we couldn't quite get 100% affinity and make use of affinity based skills, but because our elemental and raw attack is decent enough, it shouldn't matter too much. But for me, this is a fun build to use against Fatalis. So long as you're not dawdling, attacking monster weak points, keeping up your assault and counter attacking whenever possible, this build can easily take down Fatalis. So there we have it, that is the build I'd recommend for taking on Fatalis with the Lance. Now of course, as you farm the monster more and more, you'll get Fatalis weaponry and gear, which is some of the best in the game and should allow you to easily take on the monster. But until then, this build will work just fine. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you an Anti-Fatalis build for the Lance in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.